Welcome to the August meeting of the Big Hole Watershed Committee. And we'll start with our round robin of introductions. I'm Pedro Marquez, the Executive Director of the Watershed Committee.
Jenny Bowler, mute. Tom Bowler, mute.
Jim Hagenwald, the rancher from Glen.
Charlie Iver from the Elkhorn Ranch, property manager.
Cass Kohler, FWP. Caitlin Cloyd, FWP. Caitlin Boring, DNRC.
Ed Scott, Weiser.
Roy Morris, George Grant.
Chris Edgington with Montana Trout Limited.
Randy Smith, Glen Rancher. Jacob Smith from Glen. Jeff Walt, Glen.
Diane Hutton, Wisdom.
Allison Allen, intern.
Port Restoration Programs Manager, Big Hole Watershed.
Shannon Ault, Associate Director of Big Hole Watershed Committee.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, did we not go around?
Hey, yo. We missed the back row. Oh. I'm all John Lewis, intercession, Dylan.
Trying to hide back there in the corner. I'll see you.
Zach Owen, Beaverhead Watershed Committee.
Mike Greenhead, Helena.
James Rancher from Melrose.
Taylor Kirkpatrick, Wise River. Serena Kirkpatrick, Wise River.
Mike Wilkinson, White River.
Mary Sutherland, Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology. Jeanette Advent, Montana Bureau of Mines. Janet Durbin, Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology.
Kathy Scott, Wise River.
Jamie Tribbett, Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest.
Craig Fellon, Outfitter.
All right. Now we can continue on. Ready? Coming up here. We'll get our precip report from Caitlin. Go. Are you on here? Oh, you're doing it. And then you're going to share too, I think, or yeah. Okay, I'm out of your way.
There's a lot of people here in August.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm just going to go through our stream flows that are happening right now and then talk about precip and looking ahead for drought and climate. So right now, stream flows in the Big Hole are higher than average for this time of year. That precipitation boost that we got at the beginning of August really helped us for about 2 weeks to keep us way above average. We're starting to get back down towards that base level that we typically see around this time of year. And unless we get any more precipitation, I think it's going to continue to reach lower CFS levels. I've got some of our USGS gauges right here with their CFS. If you want to scroll down. And then our DNRC gauges. Right now, Wisdom was at 26.4 this morning. If you want to keep scrolling for me, please. And that's just the hydrograph. I included the median average for this time of year, so we're still above average, which is great. That's the next one's below Mud Lake Creek, or Mud Creek, excuse me. And we're still doing really well as far as median averages go. Main Rock, and Melrose, you can see where we haven't gotten any precip and it's going down, dropping down pretty quickly. Glen, and then Twin Bridges. Big Hole River near Jackson, we're sitting right above 20. That's at Saginaw Bridge, so headwaters, which is still good for this time of year, I think. Spring Creek near Jackson, sitting at right about 18, which is slightly below our targets for the CCAA, but I think we're still doing good. Minor Creek. The Dickey Bridge gauge went down And so I had to spend a couple days trying to figure out what was going on. And we just ended up replacing the whole gauge. So that's where that gap in data is. I did take an actual measurement out there, so it should be good. It's good data now. But you can see where that steep decline came from the hot dry weather that we've had the last couple of days. And there's Wise River right now. I think it's sitting at about 25 CFS. As far as precipitation goes, we're doing great. Big Hole's at 103% of normal for the year. We're at 99% of the total water year, which is going to end on September 30th. So we think we have about 43 days left. Don't quote me on that. We had those really good large storms at the beginning of August. That helped out so much. But now that we have the higher temperatures and less precip, we're getting an impact on soil and stream flow conditions as far as moisture goes. And that's just the graph of the water year. The black line is this year. And so we're sitting above median at 102%. Drought status, I just included the whole map of Montana because I thought that it would give us a good idea of what's going on. If you want to scroll down just a little bit more. The Big Hole watershed is kind of sitting at no drought to abnormally dry. And I think that'll kind of change if we continue to get no precipitation through the fall. As far as temperature and precipitation for the 8 to 14 day outlook, we're going to have higher than above normal temperatures, but also above normal precipitation. So hopefully that comes to fruition and gets more rains. Seasonally, we're looking at above normal temperatures and then equal chances for precipitation at this point. Still, El Nino advisory, 95% chance of it happening through December and February and going into February of 2024. And typically, I haven't been here for that, but what that means is drier winters. Hopefully that's not the case. I always say hopefully. Yep. All right, and I think that's all we have. Do you guys have any questions?
I got a question on just the CCAA folks enrolled and where are they at? Generally speaking, folks kind of shut down for the year, or people still irrigating a little bit?
Yeah, so Pedro asked about CCAA enrolled landowners, where they're sitting at with their ditches and water right now. I think most people are shut off for the year. It looks like 99% of people are done paying. I haven't been up there at the beginning of the week yet, so I'm not 100% sure on that. But last week, everybody was finishing up, and the only ditches that are on are for stock water or for irrigation. So we're at base levels for all irrigation in the upper reaches. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. I will try to keep my comments brief from the director's desk. I guess the major thing on the drought management front is you all, the watershed committee, agreed to and voted on Jim Olson's proposal to close section 3 to fishing if section 4 hits the 150 CFS closure criteria. So that was a long time. That was a long process to get to that agreement, but I appreciate everyone weighing in on the board. You know, it turns out that our decision and the way I've understood it, FWP points to the drought plan. So this isn't something that the commission needs to take up specifically. When that trigger is hit, just like any other trigger, FWP, you know, the commission gets a proposal to enact the regulations as FWP wants them to. So they'll just get a, hey, we hit 150, we need to close sections 3 and 4. That's how it's going to go. So it's not really, I guess I at first thought it might have been part of like the commission's meeting agenda to make these decisions, but it's not. It's really, once the drought committee has agreed and updated its management plan, FWP points to that, and that's how we move forward. So any questions on that? Hopefully we don't hit it. Maybe, you know, we get another storm this weekend and we never even touch that, which many people in the negotiations started since February mentioned that might not even ever happen. But I appreciate that we have a process in place. I did announce that at the governor's meeting in Wise River. It happened last week. There was a heck of a showing by the local community. I think everybody that's ever lived in Wise River was there. And kudos to the Cambridge brothers for being the social media wizards of the Valley, pretty much getting everybody there. I guess my take homes, Jim Hagenbarth and I had a seat at the table. We were able to talk from our perspectives. For those that weren't there, Trout Unlimited was there, Craig and Wade were there representing guides and outfitters, and then the scientists at MSU and FWP that will be leading all the studies. So, my takeaways from that meeting is that there's a whole lot of resources and science going to figuring out what's wrong with the fish. They are doing all the fish biology that you can imagine, and they're also doing like AI related data analysis through Montana Tech. So Montana State, MSU. So their lab's going to put a lot towards this, and they're going to be, sounds like, hiring and recruiting students and people to do this work. So that'll be pretty important who ends up doing that work there. So science will continue guiding the fisheries and decision making. I was encouraged, I think Jim brought up a couple of really important points, and the governor responded that storage of all types has to be on the table. We've got to look at proactive measures, managing the resource to leave late season water available for us. That resonates a lot with what we're doing, and it was kind of the message that I put forward, that our drought management plan is a reactive document. It works great. It's got a lot of cooperation, thanks to everyone here that works with that plan. But moving forward, how do you create more water in the system, right? And that's the landscape work and the restoration work that Ben leads. So pushing for that and pushing for more dollars to do more of that and more of it at scale is kind of my message. Vegetation management was brought up. Thirsty trees taking water was definitely a thing, and appreciate that was brought up by the governor. So from where I sit, I see people in power making statements and acknowledging these issues. I'm going to hold them to their word. So when the next grant opportunities that come up, we'll be putting a proposal together for modeling and looking at storage locations in the Big Hole. We're going to continue with that effort, and I'll be able to go to the governor and ask him for a letter of support, because he said he would support it. So hopefully he follows through, and that just puts more wind under our sails to keep going with the work that we're doing. Kind of how I see it. I don't think there's much more to add there. I mean, I think we're doing everything we can on the fisheries side through the drought management plan. And yeah, any questions on that? It would have been great, I think, to see more guides and outfitters in the room. Felt like Craig, you and Wade did a great job representing the industry there. It would have been great to see more folks behind you, and it came together pretty quickly. So maybe I missed the ball and not sending the word out, but I pretty much found out I was going to be at the table the morning before I was supposed to be there. So hopefully we'll improve on that next time. Yeah, Charlie.
What kind of storage?
What type of storage?
Yeah.
I mean, we're the ones that are going to go after the grants to put the options and the alternatives together, and been having discussions with Bureau of Mines too, and with Jeanette. She's got ideas, all kinds of everything that you've heard if you've come to these meetings before, right? Deep water. Are there sites to do groundwater injections and then pull that water later in the year? Are there sites, are wetlands going to do it? High mountain, high elevation meadow restoration, and hard storage. It's not off the table. It's a huge slog. And then hard storage of all sizes and types. I don't think that the idea that we're going for here in a proposal would be to really take existing available data, use a LiDAR data set to really find the best places on the landscape to do this work. Run cost benefit analyses, figure out what's really going to pencil and what's going to deliver late season cold water for everybody. I don't have any of these answers. This is all really complicated stuff. So each one of these alternatives kind of has to get vetted, and then the location of that alternative also, it's got to be right. It's more of lots of pots of spaghetti on the wall as opposed to choosing one and hope it sticks. right? In the past, we've identified specific projects and gone after money to do, Twin Lakes or Pettingill Dam or these other places, and, even sent Randy to Washington, D.C. to hustle up money, didn't go very well. So I'm reluctant to choose one spot to save all of our, solve all of our problems and invest all the eggs in that basket, right? So that's kind of the approach. Anything else on that? On the governor? It should be a first of many, hopefully, meetings. Yeah, Craig.
Last time I talked to you,
Suzanne?
Yeah, that's, we need experts like her and the expertise in her shop to really look at this stuff. And so she went to conferences on some of these approaches. And so that's how we do it, right? Bring the science and start the decision-making process on top of that. Does that cover your question? Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Yes, sir.
Studying everybody together. Standings is important. Especially in one government.
Yeah.
We have a broad base of support, it's better. And I think that's what happened.
That we lost a key player or two, dropped out. Yeah, they could be. So Randy basically said, to move forward with storage, we're going to need all voices, all constituent groups, everybody on board. And that's absolutely true. What that looks like is when we send letters to the governor, we have all the signatures. Yeah.
Storage. Spraying with methodological time to create storage because of so much water. And then if you do that, does that have any effect downstream when you have high water like that? Or does it just pass on to, to Missouri and Mississippi, and it's really not an issue?
Yeah, that's a good question on storage and what type of storage and where and when do you do it. So when I presented in February, that was I kind of laid out the framework of the different types of storage that you could go through. And one of the things I've heard the DNRC somewhat enthusiastic about is the idea of diverting water pre-irrigation, so pre-April, when we have a ton of it and no one has any rights to it. I don't, the water rights implications of this is sort of beyond me, but there are people that know this stuff and can work with us on it, right? But the idea being, if there are places where you can divert water pre-irrigation, hold it on the landscape in some way and be able to release it, either passively or, with a head gate or something, that'd be interesting if we could find locations to do that, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not excluding any option. I'm open to all of them, until someone gives me a good reason to throw an idea out. Okay, moving on. Anyone else? Yeah, Jim.
Yeah. A lot of things that are subject to litigation.
And the litigation is based upon quite often a business model that generates income for those litigants. And as they do that, it's important for us to stand up and present the economic impact of not doing due to ecological services on the landscape, because it's huge. The amount of money that is lost, the economic opportunity by not logging to use prescribed fire or getting more water is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And we have to start pressing that argument, because it's you might pay through equal access to justice these folks, 2.5 million or something like that, but the loss on the resource of not doing what we should be doing is multiple times that.
Yeah.
And so that argument we have to start rising up and presenting to the courts.
Are you suggesting the watershed committee be that person?
No.
Okay.
Everyone.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. I did print out, I was curious, I've heard Jim talk about this so much. I did actually print out the entire database of EJA claims, equal access to justice. For those of you that don't know, it's a law. It's basically created so that if you're denied Social Security or veterans benefits and you sue the government to get your benefits, you could get your claims, your costs covered. Because it's an individual, right? And you're gonna, I didn't get my benefits or they shortchanged me. It was a law passed to support the idea that an individual can sue the government to get what they're owed and not have to suffer the court costs. Some activist groups have seized on that law. So when you look at the database, it's about, 56,000 claims or something. And they're all like, you look at them, it's Veterans Affairs, Social Security Administration, $2,000, $3,000, $7,000 court fees. But when you can sort the whole database by amount, and there's maybe a page of some really expensive ones, and then you get the environmental groups right up in there, right on the second page. $480,000 reimbursements for lawsuits against the Forest Service, against the BLM. So I added it up. I kind of did a search term. I looked up the regular culprits. There's only 4 or 5 groups. It was something like $12.6 million of taxpayer money has funded litigation by 4 or 5 organizations. Over the last, that's only 5 years worth of data. So I have that spreadsheet. I'm happy to share it. I don't have time to do a lot of analysis on it. So I've shared it with others that might do that and might help us sort of build that case. I also sat down with Ryan Zinke's representative in Missoula and sort of spoke about the same issue. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. If anyone has connections with Forest Service or lawyers, I'll also drop just a little idea, but if these activists are preventing us from managing and the trees have water, then aren't the activists preventing the grayling from getting water? And aren't the activists preventing irrigators from getting water downstream? They're a sort of reverse lawsuit sitting there somewhere for some lawyer to take on. Just a thought. That'd be fun to watch.
Or a clean and healthy.
Or a clean and healthy environment is another way to go. Okay, I'll drop that because that's way beyond my business. You get me all fired up with this stuff, Jim. I go to do things. Okay. Speaking of the Forest Service, we'll be touring the leadership team of the BVRD tomorrow at our Elkhorn project site. This is really exciting. It's been 3 years in the making. Ben's been leading the charge. We've got a little handout that we'll give them tomorrow of everything that we've been able to do in the last 3 years up on that site. It's pretty impressive. We brought $500,000 to bear on characterizing the Elkhorn site and getting a remedy in place. So I have a couple asks to the leadership. Start looking for the big money. Like, we're going to have a design here in another year or so. Start scratching at those big pots of money, because this is going to be a big remediation and hopefully improvement of the overall visitation of that entire site for the forest. Hopefully we can help them create a pretty remarkable place to recreate in the Big Hole. There's piles of dirt out there that you don't want to be eating lunch on or near. Just FYI. So that'll be exciting. A lot of great work has gone into that. Another big thing that we've been doing for a while, it's now taken 3 attempts, but now we finally collected all of our data loggers that we installed last year. The swamp behind the Wise River Club almost took Allie from us, almost took me, but I found the darn thing. We had put some data loggers in. And what we're trying to do is again, build the case for needing to do work in this tributary. Last year Ben and I measured cross sections across Wise River for the whole year. So we have a great looking hydrograph from top to bottom. And then this temperature logger was just in that wetland behind the Wise River Club. And the max temperatures, I mean, the water doesn't get higher than like 60 degrees ever over 2 summers. With all that, this is all return flows coming off of ag fields, filling these wetlands and these ponds in the sort of bottom areas of Smart Creek and Wise River. So that gives us a good indication of what's kind of feeding that system late season towards the bottom of it. After we had enough work, I think, and enough momentum that FWP picked up the ball, and Caitlin and Andy Broman from FWP are now continuing to monitor flows on the Wise River. And we've already started kind of identifying some places where some shifts with irrigation could really benefit late season water for the Big Hole. So we're starting to kind of explore some of these ideas, make sure they work with irrigators. But that's how it goes. It starts slowly. There's a lot of good energy around that work. And then we've got irrigation infrastructure also that's we're going to do survey on the 3 main head gates on the Wise River this month. 3 head gates on Jerry Creek will get surveyed, and then we'll go after money to improve that infrastructure. And that also gets measuring devices get put in on all of those. And then the last thing I'll say, future fisheries, I think I mentioned last time, they're really flush. That program has a lot of money for fisheries related projects. So we're all ears. You guys know how we do. When we hear there's money and someone brings us a good project, we can match those 2 together. One of the things they asked us to do is to revisit all the future fisheries projects in the Big Hole. There are about 21 of them that haven't been monitored in a lot of years. So they gave us some funds to go around and see how those projects are performing 5, 6, 7, 10 years, 15 years later. So we're in the process of doing that as well. We'll be doing 10 of those sites this year, and we'll probably do 10 more next year. I think I'm done. Yeah, any questions? All right. Steering committee. We actually met. You haven't been here. No, everything's going great. I think we're steered. We okay?
We just appreciate this, all the staff's doing it, the people helping them. Doing a wonderful job. Thank you. What for the resource.
Okay. I'll take that to the bank. Who's next? Tana's next.
All right, so we had a table at the Montana Folk Festival in July in Butte, and Pedro and Allie and I manned the water filling station and had a table about the watershed committee. And we told the people of Butte where their water comes from, which, in case y'all don't know, about 40% of Butte's water comes from the Big Hole, sometimes more. So that's pretty substantial. At that event, we got 31 new email subscribers, and Pedro and I both sat on panels for the Clark Fork Watershed Education Program and their educational forum. Pedro talked about stream access, and I talked about public wildlands. And we distributed a bunch of new stickers and magnets and keychains, and we've got all of that on the table back there. You're welcome to it. And I brought my little ones along for the day, and they had fun. So that was a fun event. We're doing our weekly drought updates via both text message and email. So I send those out every Thursday. So if you'd like to get those, you can either shoot me an email or just let me know, and I can put your information in the system, or you can text drought to 26989. I think we've got something like 170 people on that list now. So it's been fairly well received. And then for our wildlife program, our carcass removal took place in the spring. So that was back in May, but I didn't have the numbers to report at the last meeting. So we picked up 21 carcasses for 5 participants, which is pretty low, but we were only able to provide the service for 1 month because the truck got snowed in down at Centennial. So we'll make sure and get it up here earlier this year, so that doesn't happen. And then our range rider program is going on right now. So our range rider, Chet Robertson, patrols 6 U.S. Forest Service allotments for 7 livestock producers in the Upper Big Hole from July 1st through September 30th. He's doing that now. There's been quite a bit of wolf activity, but I don't believe there's been any confirmed depredations at this point. And the Livestock Loss Board just met on Monday and they awarded us $15,000 for that program. And then we also submitted letters of support for the Heart of the Rockies initiatives proposals to the America the Beautiful Challenge and the RCCP. I forget what that stands for. Do you know?
No.
Well, it's another big federal grant for wildlife stuff. So they're going to go after the America the Beautiful Challenge, and if they don't get that, then they'll go after the other ones. So either way, they get that funding. We'll be one of the subgroups that get a part of that. So, and we'll use it for our range rider program and our carcass removal. And that's all I've got for wildlife. Do you have anything wildlife related, Jim, or anybody?
We got bears coming out, grizzly bears coming out of our ears on the centennials. We do have the ARS Poisonous Plant Center out in Logan, Utah, has been doing experiments on our larkspur moss. And they're working on a product called AB that comes from Iowa that uses a clay base that seems to absorb the toxins from larkspur. So why that's important is quite often cattle, of course, sheep love larkspur and get along great with it, but cattle, it kills them and then it brings the bears in and causes more conflict. So if they can get that product so that people understand what it does, it'll make a big difference. Could.
That's up.
Okay.
Shoot the note there. Hi guys, Jem's and Chet's reports. He got sprayed by bear spray. His bear spray blew up on his ATV. And
Oh no.
he had about a page and a half about him getting through it. It's like I just read his stuff just to like get entertained by that kind of stuff. Cool. It's been a good couple months, guys, since the last time we met in June. I'll run through the highlights. First being our Smith Sage Springs restoration project. We're making a lot of good headway on it. The last couple of weeks, I went out with Stephen Carpenetto with the DEQ. He's the big wetlands scientist for the whole entire state. He's really excited about this project. It's just outside of Wisdom. And part of the DEQ 319 grant is that we need to write this monitoring. It's usually a big kind of pain in my butt, but he's been helping me along with it because he does want to see some really good data behind this thing. And I appreciate it because I think we are going to get some really good data. The monitoring plan is really, it's tight and it's one of the best ones I think I've produced. And it's because he's been helping me out. And he actually came out to the field. We're doing all sorts of cool head cut measurements and BHI, which is the bank hazard index. And it basically will help you figure out how much sediment one in particular bank is contributing. Anyway, really excited about that because he's excited about it and that makes me happy. But we got that plan written. I've also been getting some additional funding through the Trout and Salmon Foundation. I wrote a grant up because they're also excited about this project. And it's just awesome because so many folks are excited about this project. So I'm really, you're going to be hearing a lot more about the Smith Sage Springs. Because just actually the last couple of days, actually, I've been working with the Intermountain Joint West Venture. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. But they're very excited about partnering with us and trying to get this story told out into the public. And I've got a filmmaker who's going to come out and we're going to try to get this film sort of film festival ready. So tell the story about why this wetland conservation and restoration is so important to our landscape. So I actually had the filmmaker out today for day one of filming. So that's exciting. So a lot of cool films are coming out about our work here. We're just going to start to roll them out. He's in editing right now, one for our Upper Horry Creek restoration project, and we're going to start to roll that out late fall, early winter. Same with Upper French Gulch Fish Passage. So this guy, Tom Atwater, he's really good. Anyway, we're going to be doing a big rollout for the Sage Springs, and we're starting on August 23rd. The guys are going to come out next Tuesday and mow out there, and then we're going to break ground on this one next week, next Wednesday. Let's see here, how do I proceed here? Oh, Tana, can you switch me? Yeah, this is just our design. I can go into greater detail about it. All to say is that this thing is very well thought out. We got Confluence Consulting out of Bozeman to help us out with it and to completely restore this very large and degraded wetland mesic area. Next. Another cool thing we've been doing is we started our conifer encroachment cutting on Trail Creek. This is about 507 acres. I put this thing out to bid, and a local contractor out of Dillon got it. And that also excites me just to keep the local workforce employed in our watershed. And this is a drone shot that I took just to give you guys an example of what exactly we're doing up here. We're cutting all of the trees in this wetland or grass meadow and riparian habitat that are, yeah, talk about it, right? We're cutting trees, Jim, right? That's what we're doing. But anything that's smaller than 8 inches in diameter. So that's a Forest Service spec right there that we're holding on to. So anyway, a lot of goods happened there. They've been working on Trail Creek for about 3 or 4 weeks already. So it's a big project. And then I've also been working up there for a couple of days this last couple months to look at what we can do after this to enhance the stream and enhance the hydrology up here. So there's a lot of big meadows up here that we could potentially re-wet and get all of that soaking into the groundwater for that late season benefit. Next. I've had a great time up in Browns Gulch outside of Glen. I had about a week and a half of work up there. We installed 55 low-tech structures in the main stem of Browns Gulch. And I had my father-in-law got his church group out from Wisconsin, and they were out for a week and they had no idea what they were in for. And they had a blast. I think this type 2 type fun where like, yeah, that was fun. Yeah, type 2. So I had Yep out there out of Dillon. Crew's been great to work with. And then we had a Wild Rockies Field Institute class come up and get their hands dirty. They're learning about restoration, and we gave them an opportunity to actually get their hands dirty and see what it's all about. And Pedro and I talked to them about all of the things restoration in the Big Hole. So I think they get a big benefit out of that. We're going to continue that partnership into the future. And I think the great thing is we can give them that classroom perspective and then give them the on the ground work too. So that's also fun to work with these guys. Do the next one, Tana. I just take so many photos that it's worth just showing that, like how much fun we're having out there. This is the Worthy crew, and just an example of the Little Beaver Dam analogs that we're building. Allie's the absolute expert on this stuff. She's fun to watch her work, huh? She goes to town. She backs up water. Puts her head down and backs up water. That's what we want to see. So I don't know. I tell everyone who comes up there and is doing this type of work that, like, really it's not just one structure that is going to do everything, right? It's the combination of all these structures in the drainage, and we installed 55 of them. So you're really going to have that big impact in the spring. And it, big is air quotes here, but it's an impact. So we like that kind of work. I just wanted to show this off. This is our Upper Oregon Creek project. This last month, I went up and did the monitoring again. I had to write a monitoring plan with DEQ, and this is, I'm following through with it by taking my after photos, but these after photos really tell the story. This is all impacted lands from the smelter, and that's exactly a year out after we seeded and fertilized 25 acres by helicopter. So I mean, you can clearly see that what we're doing is working up there, and getting vegetation on the landscape to hold that soil together so it doesn't keep eroding. In this particular site, this hillside was eroding right into the bottom of the creek here, going right into Oregon Creek. So, and then we've done a ton of low tech work in the stream itself to capture those sediments. So yeah, we're gonna actually the next one, Tana, see if you can play this. Give you another visual. So we had a filmmaker out here to do some drone shots before and after. And if you want to play it again, Tana, we'll do it just for grids. But this is the 25 acres that we seeded. This is what it looked like before. And just our nice after shot of after. Granted, they're slightly different seasons, but you get the idea of what we're doing. And this is going to be one of the films that Tom helps us roll out. And this is going to be something to hang our hats on because I'm proud of this project. Is that all of it or is it one more? Cool, other happenings. Pedro talked about the Elkhorn. One of the benefits that came out of this month is that we had our archaeologist out of Butte go up there and do everything that he needed to do to basically get through compliance through all the cultural stuff that we actually need to follow. It's important. It's a very culturally rich site, but for this new repository that we're looking at, we had to get him up there to make sure that there were no cultural resources in the area that we would disturb and that we need to keep intact. He didn't find anything, so that's great. It's going through SHPO right now. And hopefully we're going to get the green light on for us to go in and actually do the repository investigation. We know that there's a ton of contaminated soils up there, and now we just need to continue to figure out where exactly we want to put them. We're hedging towards putting them adjacent to this existing repository. So that's the work that we're doing up in Elkhorn this year, is to do this repository investigation. Things are going to be tight on time. Hopefully you do get a lot of snow early, right? But hopefully we don't for this particular project. I had watershed consulting for another week. The Anaconda Uplands, we did a ton of work, and like we always do. But this particular day, we started to clean up plastic from Pedro's old days. We're cleaning up all the work that he did in 2014 or 16. Right. So there's a ton of these plastic exclosures that are just everywhere up there, and I wanted to make sure that we got them all, and we did that. So that was one of the things that came out of that 1 week's worth of work in the Anaconda Uplands. And then always just working on future plans and projects, so that also keeps me busy. We have some good ones coming down the pipeline. Be hearing about those when we actually can talk about them. Any questions? All right.
Okay, yeah, we've got two, I think, new items. Jamie Tribbett, you want to come up and do your thing?
Hey everyone, I'm Jamie Tribbett from the Beaverhead Sierra Lodge National Forest, and I was wildlife biologist on the forest for about 2.5 years, and we just got a new position on the forest as partnership coordinator. So I'm just transitioning into that position about a month ago. And the reason I'm here to present is that the Beaverhead Sierra Lodge is looking for resource advisory committee members. We have the opportunity to create 2 new board committees, and each board requires 15 members. So I know this group is amazing and producers and a lot of great minds in this room. So I really wanted to present here to try to recruit some of you for our committee.
What does that mean?
I'm about to go into that. Thank you. So I'll just talk a little bit about the background of what all this means, and then what membership involves and what kind of projects this means. But I'm going ahead of myself, so move it one. So a little bit of background on the resource advisory committees. Congress passed. Well, I'll give a little bit of background before the background. The Forest Service was created in 1905. And there's about 56 million acres of land during that time. In 1908, it was up to 172 million acres. So to compensate counties for the land taxes that were lost because these lands were now federal, they created the act, this is very small, I'm sorry, the Secure Rural Schools Act. And what that did was allow the Forest Service to give some of the funding some of the revenue that they received from grazing allotments, mining, things like that, that the forest created revenue for, give that to the local counties and the states so that they could work on projects in the counties for schools, for roads, for funding, things like that they couldn't get funding for otherwise. And I apologize, this is so tiny. So the resource advisory committees are made up of local residents from each county. We have 2 RAC committees that we are trying to fill positions on right now, and that's the Tri-County RAC, and that is Powell, Granite, and Deer Lodge counties, which probably no one in this room is from there. And then the Southwest Montana RAC committee, which is Madison, Beaverhead, Jefferson, and Silver Oak counties. So we're trying to recruit people from those counties. And what these committees do is come together and figure out what projects that come forward they're going to fund. There's about $10 million for Montana right now, and that includes Lolo, all the other national forests in Montana. So there's a lot of funding to tap into right now. And if we don't fill these committees, then we don't get any funding. Thank you.
Like if you don't get the 15 on each committee,
exactly,
the money doesn't flow.
Exactly. Yeah, we have, and we're kind of in a time crunch with turnover with people on the forest. So we're really trying to move quickly and get applications, get members' interest. So we'll go on to the membership. So for the new membership, we're first outreaching, and then individuals will submit applications, and I can get that to you through Tana or other means, I guess. And then the nomination packages come to us, and then we send it to Washington, D.C., and they select the members from the nominations that we submit. So you'll submit an application, and you'll submit a resume, and then it'll go to Washington, D.C., and they'll pick who we want them to pick. And then their representatives are required from 3 different categories, and that'll be on the next slide. We have to have 5 members from each category, and I'll go through these in just a minute. You're probably wondering about time commitment because everyone's so busy. This is just a 1 to 2 day maximum commitment per year. So you go into the conference room, sit down, people present their projects that they're asking for funding for, and then this committee will go through and determine which proposals they want to fund. So it's a great opportunity to see help decide where your federal funding goes to. So it's a really unique opportunity. Each member has a 4-year term once they're appointed. And then these categories are very small. Category A is forest products, developed outdoor recreation, members from these organizations. OHV users, commercial recreation activities, energy and mineral mining, commercial timber industry, and then federal grazing. I know a lot of ranchers and landowners in here, permittees. And then category B is environmental organizations, regional or local, dispersed recreational activities, archaeological. So tiny.
I know.
I don't think I can. That was sometime later as well. All right, guys.
I'll put it on a minute too.
Okay, perfect. And I can send you something that's easier to. Yeah. And then category C is state elected office, county or local elected officials, tribal members, and then school officials, teachers, and public at large. So anyone in this room can apply, is what I'm saying. So some of the projects that you can apply for funding, it's not just.
Yeah.
Sorry. So who can submit a proposal? It's not just National Forest that can submit a proposal for funding. State and local governments can, and they have gotten funded. Private entities, nonprofit entities, and landowners. If you submit a project that you want to do on your land, you can bring it to the committee and they can approve or deny it, and you could get funding. So like I said, there's a lot of funding to go around. So if anyone has a project, even if you aren't interested in joining the committee, you can submit a project.
What's the nexus on private land to RAC funding? How, right? Because RAC is forest funding, you know what you have to demonstrate.
Yes, and it'll be on the next slide actually. So some of the projects can include road trail infrastructure maintenance, arbouration, soil productivity improvements, forest ecosystem health improvements, watershed restoration and maintenance, wildlife and fish habitat restoration, maintenance and improvement, noxious and exotic weed control, and native species reestablishment. So most anything can be funded. Yeah, a lot. It sounds like a lot of projects that you're working on could be funded. This is one of the projects that was funded on the Beaverhead Deer Lodge, and this was a bee study. The botanists got some funding to go out and study pollinators to see what pollinators we have in the forest. We do have a couple sensitive species on the forest, so it was just a study to determine what we had. And then other projects that were approved: road improvement, signage, recreation site maintenance, trail maintenance, weeds. There was an avalanche beacon checker that was approved down in Elkhorn area, drainage corrections, fuels reductions projects, campground expansion. So you can see it's not just the Forest Service, other entities, the county, Friends of Thompson Park got funding as well. So it's pretty all-inclusive and a great opportunity. And this is it. So just wanted to say, if anyone has any questions, please let me know. But it's a great opportunity to help decide where your federal funding goes and fund projects that you think are important, bring projects to the table that you think are important, and yeah, get some good work done. Yeah.
If you remember the from
it does not. You just can't vote on that one. Yeah, great question.
My son's one, I was trying to figure out the Zoom thing, but when do they meet and where?
It's usually in the spring. It's been a little bit variant, but this year it was in April, and it's usually in Dillon at the Forest Service office. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Usually they'll do the Southwest Montana RAC one day, and the next day they'll do the Tri-County RAC. So, yeah. And yeah, if anyone has any questions or wants more information, please let me know. Resource Advisory Committee. Yes. And that's okay. I probably like breeze through it.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Okay, and we have one more piece of additional business. Where's Mike? Okay. There we go. Anywhere more?
This looks like the most uncomfortable spot.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Burnett, and I live in Helena. And I'm here today as a fisherman on the river. And I have been coming down here with two friends of mine. All three of us have long careers with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. The first one that I wanted to introduce to you is not with us tonight, but Ron Marcoux is one of my friends that was on the river in the 70s when he was the biologist here. He went on to Region 3 as the manager and onto the director's office. And then Jerry Wells filled in next with him as the biologist on the river. And he then followed Ron to Bozeman and took over the fisheries manager in Region 3. Then myself, I was with the education division, information education for 37 years doing documentary films. And I did a lot of work on the Big Hole and Fleecer. I got my start as I grew up in Lewistown and Livingston. And my dad had a small business he couldn't get away from very long, but when he could get away, we'd go to the Yellowstone. That's where the passion for fishing started there. And when I went to work for the Montana Fish and Game Department, before it was Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Ron and Jerry introduced me to the Big Hole River. And it really immediately became the gold standard that it was for them, and it became the gold standard for me as far as a place to come to because of the fishery, because of the landscape that river runs through, which is in your backyards, the diversity of landscape, and also the culture of the people here, the tradition, the values, and the history that was really, for somebody who grew up in Montana, it was almost like getting to go back a little bit in time, back to Lewistown, back to Livingston, in the 50s. And so this river became a place where Ron and Jerry and I would get together at least once a year and we'd plan a fishing trip. And this year I saw Jerry in the grocery store and I said, we need to get together and figure out when we're going to come down to the Big Hole and spend a day or two and get Ron involved. And so he said he's all in, good to go. And so we were going to get together, and then the article came out with Montana Standard. But we were trying to figure out what to do. So we got together instead of planning our trip, and no judgment to anyone, but we made the decision that we weren't going to come down and fish until we knew what was wrong with the river, and the river had turned the corner and was headed towards recovery. And so we thought, what can we do? What can we do to make a difference that's positive? We have all this, I think, how they do it with people who've been around a while, they call it institutional knowledge. And we had a lot of institutional knowledge, mainly those two guys on the river. And then we had a lot of data. And so what we did is we thought, well, we got together with Jim Olson, and Jim was nice enough to spend some time with us and Dick Oswald. And he went over the material that I think he presented to you folks. And we got a little bit of an insight on the data. And so we drafted a letter and wrote that to the department with some recommendations, mostly built by those biologists. That was, I understand when it's beyond your pay grade. They were talking about things that wasn't where my expertise was. But anyway, we took that letter. Ron went in and met with the director, Dustin Temple, and Quentin Kujala, and also talked to a lot of people with Trout Unlimited. And Jerry contacted existing and former biologists that worked on the headwaters rivers and tried to just get those people engaged in what was happening here. And overall, what we want to do and feel we can maybe the first thing we could do to make a difference in the future is to encourage people to share information and to work collaboratively. And what better group is there than this group to talk about this, like preaching to the choir. But anyway, we want to always encourage people that are working on this river to work together. And what I did as I found out about what Craig and Wade were doing, with the Save Wild Trout. And so I went up and met with them and had a nice, I showed up at dinner time, which was not planned, but it was real. I'm going back at dinner time. Yeah. So anyway, they spent about 2 hours with me explaining what they were doing. We had some ideas that I wanted to run by them. And then I stopped in and saw Craig since then. And so that was where we were, again, encouraging people to communicate, to work together. And during these meetings, we found out, just kind of because it happened fast, that there was going to be this roundtable with the governor. And so Ron and I, Jerry wasn't available, Ron and I got to pick up and drove down, and we attended that meeting. And we went back and we got in the pickup, and Ron said to me, he said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I listened, I think, as intently as I could to everyone, and I took notes, but I heard 3 people. And Ron said, yeah, that's kind of what I thought, and where I was too. And that was Jim Hagenbarth and Mr. Stanchfield, I believe, stood up and spoke. And the third one was Bill Garrison. And we sat there in the pickup for a minute, and we talked all the way home about what we can do and what we are going to do is that as anglers, and we have contact with some, not a great deal, not like guides do, but just run-of-the-mill guys that come down here and enjoy the river. We're going to try to direct every one of those conversations regarding agriculture is not what agriculture takes from the river, but what agriculture leaves behind for the trout. And so that's the reason that I drove down here today, is to start that effort, is that we're going to try to engage people in a positive way of looking at what it takes to grow grass, what it takes to keep this culture together, The people who are ranching are also the people who are on the volunteer fire department, on search and rescue. They're on the school board. They are in the local churches. They're important to this community, and that we feel that that's been overlooked. And I'm here to say thank you to the irrigators and the ranchers on the Big Hole River and the Big Hole watershed, and encourage all of you to continue working together. So that's the reason I'm here. I think in some ways it's long overdue, but moving forward, that's our message, is that this is a community that hinges on that water, and it's being shared. It's been shared with us in the past, and we really appreciate it. So thank you for the time to speak.
Thank you. Let's take a break. That was really great to hear. Thanks to all of you, and especially those of you that have been doing this for 25 years. Have a snack, have some coffee, and then we'll get Cole set up here, and we'll be back in, I'm going to say 5. It's actually going to be 10, but I'm going to say 5. As you're making your way to your seats, an announcement that I forgot to put into the agenda here from the Montana Bureau of Mines, just a quick update on what they've been doing and when the hearing.
Thank you. I'll be super quick. I don't want to hold us up, but I just wanted to put a plug in about the work we've been doing down in Glen. This project, for some of you know, was proposed by this committee, looking at how different hydrogeologic influences most impact temperature and water supply in the Big Hole. So we don't have anything too much to say yet. We're deep in data collection, but we do have a little kind of update info sheet in the back about what we've been doing out there, with the big highlights being that we've been monitoring water levels at about 50 wells down there and 15 surface water sites. Been collecting water chemistry at a subset of those sites to better understand how groundwater and surface water interact there. We drilled 7 new wells in June. I heard some rumors flying around from landowners who thought we were drilling oil or weird places for someone to put a house, but those were monitoring wells, just to set the record straight. So big thank you to the landowners that let us do that. Jim Hagemarth, Randy Smith, and Todd Garrison. And then we also have started conducting our temperature surveys on the river, looking at where we see groundwater coming into the river and what temperatures we're seeing with that, to get a better picture of kind of the temperature balance going on. So I can't say much about it yet, but in November, I'm going to give a little bit more detailed update on what we've been doing. So if you're interested, pick up one of these. It has our contact info on it, and we'd be happy to chat with you again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we will be partnering more and more with the Bureau of Mines with all these questions about storage and hydrology. There's really a lot of expertise in that shop. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Cole Mannix up to the podium to talk to us about the Old Salt Co-op. I just know Cole from previous work in this business. He's done a lot for ranching, wildlife conflict, other things, and I just think what he's doing is awesome and wanted you guys to all hear about it.
Thanks, sir. Up to the uncomfortable spot.
Yep.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cole. I live in Helena, and here to talk to you a little bit about a local startup meat company that we've been working on for about 3 years. I grew up in the Blackfoot. My family, my mom and dad, my aunts and uncles, 3 siblings, 3 first cousins all ranched together. But I live in town and care though a lot about ranching and the conservation of large landscapes and the role that ranching can play in that. And my family, a little bit of background, we started marketing locally with some of our herd about 18 years ago. And we built that up over time to where now it's about 30% of our market is the local business. And so we sell about 300 finished animals and 150 cull cows a year locally. And we get them processed at Superior Meats, about a 2 hours drive to the west of the ranch. And then mostly we sell kind of a half and half wholesale to places like the Good Food Store and the Top Ad and Missoula and Helena restaurants and small grocery stores. And then the other half, we have about 600 customers, individuals, families who buy. And my brother and cousins, 1 week they'll drive to Missoula and Missoula and the Flathead on a Saturday and do a drop off. Customers will meet them there. And then another week they'll come up through Helena, Bozeman, and Butte and do a drop off. And that's how we built the program. But we've kind of faced this question of what do we do with this local program? We are more profitable by moving livestock locally, but it's also really engaged the next generation. It's created a lot of dialogue between the customer base and us, where we really never, selling commodity animals, we never had that relationship with customers before. So we valued the program a lot. And yet it's still pretty small, but now it's big enough. It'll be about $1 million in sales this year. It's big enough that it takes a lot of bandwidth and a lot of freezer storage on the ranch, and a lot of packing orders, and a lot of things that are not changing water and managing livestock and not ranching. And so we kind of face this question of, we keep growing it to the point where we can afford more staff to manage the complexity and more infrastructure, or do we kind of pull back a little bit and make this a smaller element of what we do and continue to mostly market the way we've always marketed, which is through various different feeders, Superior Livestock Auction. And if you're, even at the scale, which is in terms of a local program, relatively large now, even at that scale, with our custom processing, we process a little bit in Ronan, but mostly Superior. We've kind of run up against, they don't have a lot more space for us. But to turn around and invest in our own facility, we've made 5 times the volume that we move right now, just to pay back the note on the brick and mortar. And then we face all the other questions of, can we really sell 4 or 5 times more meat than we're selling now? A lot of the wholesale accounts that we sell to now are kind of the low-hanging fruit. A lot of that's picked. So can we really grow enough to support a facility? Do we have enough market access? And then, if we put the plant in the Blackfoot, could we keep that plant busy? Could we have a labor force to run it? An inspector would be there. And then could we raise the money? Because we don't have enough money, to invest in that kind of scale of thing by ourselves. So several years ago, I approached our family's business and several other ranches around the state. There's now 4 of us, and said, well, what if we throw in together, supply is what we have a lot of, but throw in together to market under one brand, to own our own processing, to raise money together, to secure debt together. And so we formed Old Salt Co-op as an attempt to do that. The first discussions were like fall of 2020. We formed the entity in spring of 21. And we actually started off as a formal cooperative. And then as we went, it became clear we were doing too many things to be a co-op. And so we reformed as an LLC with kind of co-op principles built in. So the ranches own the majority of the company. They control the board. Workers can buy in as the minority of the board. We raise money from a preferred class of interest that doesn't have governance, but they get their money back first. So we raise money mostly from, angel and venture capital. Those are not a fit for us because we're not ever going to flip the business. This is something they're going to live in long term if it's going to work. And so we found high net worth individuals who wanted to see this happen in Montana. We've raised about 2.3 million of private money, put that together with 600,000 of grants and about 6.5 million of debt. And it's a scary place to be because we're just taking a big risk, but that has allowed us to get going. And so the first thing we did in fall of 21 is we started a burger shop in Helena called The Outpost. And we just leased a space. It was a kind of a dive bar in Helena called the Gold Bar. And they had an old kitchen that the person that had been running that was retiring. So we just leased it. We did a small renovation and we started selling burgers. A friend of mine grew up in Laurel, had spent 15 years at Portland restaurants, and we recruited him and created a menu. And that place has now been operating for almost a couple of years. So it's kind of a way to test the market, how much local appetite is there for a connection to the landscapes the product comes from. And it was busy from the first month and has only gotten busier. It moves about 750 pounds of ground beef a week, 12 employees. And so it's been a good outlet for grind, but it's just been a really fun thing in the Helena community. It was just a lot of energy around it. And so we wanted to have, a little enterprise that would kick off some profit that would help stabilize us. And that has really helped with that. It's our only profitable enterprise. Everything else is startup. So the next thing we did was we bought a little custom exempt processor that was for sale in Helena. It used to be called K&S Meats. And they did 4-H and wild game. And because one of the major questions we had is, can we build a labor corps of folks that know how to cut meat and have spent their, that have the skill set that I certainly don't have. So we started off last July by processing 4-H animals for Lewis and Clark County Fair, and then we moved into wild game season and we processed a bunch of animals, and we were getting some good traction with the core team of about 7 guys. And then as happens when you don't have USDA inspection yet, this little plant doesn't have a kill floor. It's just, we have a kill truck that can run around the valley, but it doesn't have a kill floor. So come January, it was quiet. And we've kept that 7-man team employed for 6 months borrowing money as we build a USDA slaughter floor and as we renovate this little cut and wrap plant to achieve USDA inspection, so that not only can we process meat for our own brand and sell it retail and wholesale, but we can process for other farms and ranches who are also selling to their own third-party customers, commercial. So it was, it was a big risk to kind of keep all these folks on payroll without a lot of business. But now we're moving back into 4-H season. We'll be busy for 6 months while we get our USDA processing certification, and I hope by January that's up and running. We also launched an online meat brand based on meat processing rules. If we get animals slaughtered under federal or state inspection, we can bring those to our plant, cut meat, and sell them to our own direct customers online or to our own wholly owned restaurants. So we are actively processing meat that we sell online and that we sell through our own restaurants. But other than that, it's all custom exempt, 4-H, wild game, that kind of. The next thing we did was we purchased an old building called Bert and Ernie's in Helena. And we're in the process of renovating that to be a butcher shop and a charcoal fired grill. So the demo is now done and we're moving into the long and frustrating process of renovation on that, but it's going to be ideally it'll be a busy retail spot for us downtown for our beef and lamb and pork that we sell. And it'll also be a restaurant that will mostly financially carry the business. And then primarily the 2 restaurants are a way for us to meet customers that we ultimately hope to sell meat to directly. And so there's 1,400 people through this outpost restaurant a week. There'd be maybe double that through the other establishment. And so it's a way to get our name and our brand out there. People think that meat processing is a bottleneck in Montana, and it kind of is, but a more significant bottleneck is simply the fact that the world of distribution and retail is every bit as consolidated as the meat processing world. If you build a plant, but you can't access a market at enough scale to keep the plant busy, then it's not much use to have a plant. So COVID has seen quite a bit of grant and loan money come out for meat processing in the state, but the real question is, can those processors stay busy by accessing sufficient markets to keep them alive? And so anyway, it's hard to break into that wholesale world. It's hard to start selling to a Costco or a large retailer. And not only is it hard, but you can get out over your skis pretty quick, because if you get a contract with one of those and you build a supply chain, you start finishing animals, and then they push back on price or they find another supplier, you're stuck with a whole bunch of animals that are expensive and that you don't have a market for, and you're going to take a big loss on. And so instead of really building our business around wholesale, our goal is to take the 600 individuals we sell to now and make that 6,000. And that would be a pretty stable. It's hard to build that number of direct customers, but it's much more stable and resilient if you can get it built. How do you meet those customers? That comes back to the restaurants. We also held a festival for the first time this year on my family's ranch. They almost killed me. We had 1,600 people that came out. We had 14 bands. We cooked 10 hogs and 20 goats and 10 lamb and 2 beef over open fire. We had some poets, and we had a whole bunch of conservation partners who were tabling, and we had a bunch of makers from knives to hats to food products who came to display their goods. And it was just a way to build relationships with what we hope is our customer base, so that every year, hopefully we'll hold it every year. Every year we have this thing to point to, say, come to this landscape. This is an example of a landscape that you're investing in by spending your money on meat locally. And basically that's kind of an overview picture of what Old Salt is. We have 24 employees now between the meat processing and the restaurant to come, and kind of some of our corporate staff. The Seaman Livestock Company, the Hibbert family, the Anderson family, and now the LF Ranch near Augusta are kind of the ranches that are involved now. We're built to add more ranches and farms as we can generate the demand. So we're long on cattle, and we're trying to more lamb, but we need to feed it. We need to figure out the finishing infrastructure there. That's a huge key piece of this. And we don't sell a lot of pork. We currently can find enough pasture-raised kind of heritage breeds type animals, and that's what we're using for our sausages and our pate that we make, and cured ham and that kind of thing. But beef and lamb and ruminants is kind of where we want to really focus. You mind going slide further? So this is just an overview of the festival where we set up in a corner of the ranch. This is some of the hogs we were processing under the tent, and this is a picture of the entire outpost menu. Super simple, but it's been a little engine that could now for us for a couple of years. So, and those are our enterprises below. And if you go another slide, eventually we plan to incorporate bison, but right now it's beef, lamb, pork. We do a lot of specialty products. We found a guy on goodfoodjobs.com out south of San Antonio running a small meat program. It was a lifelong butcher that moved up and took a chance on us and is now part of the team, and he makes some really beautiful specialty products. All animals are born, raised, and processed in Montana. No growth hormones or self-therapeutics, but we allow for antibiotics. The ranches are all tracking their impact on key ecological indicators. And at the end of the day, the reason we're doing so many things is because we're trying to create this little infrastructure of this little ecosystem, I guess, of businesses that not only allow us to raise the animals, but then process them, do the quality control, and then market them, rather than just building meat processing by itself. Some things that we really have to figure out still that we have not. Right now, all the ruminants are grass finished. That's how my family's brand has worked. And yet, if we're going to access wholesale markets in the Bozeman area, in the Paradise Valley area, anything at much scale, it's likely that we'll have to do some grain finishing. So I've been spending a lot of time over the summer talking to custom feeders around the state, seeing what it would be like to feed with them, starting with about a 20 head a week program. And so that's kind of the risk that the ranches are considering right now. Is commodity prices for livestock have never been better. It's a really hard time to allocate a bunch of cattle to something that's risky. And so we're going to try to pick something that's not too big, but something that's meaningful enough that we can work with a feeder and that a wholesaler will be interested in us. But also, part of the way we built it is these restaurants can cash flow enough to support the very gradual growth of the meat brand. So if we don't grow the meat brand too fast, I think we will have the bandwidth to survive long enough where all of a sudden prices for livestock come down. All of a sudden the local alternative to the market becomes shinier for the ranches, and it makes more sense to grow at that time. We're still raising capital. That's been one of the huge mountains to climb, but we've raised 2.3 million out of the 3 that I think we need to raise. So we're getting close. And right now we've got 3 projects under construction: a slaughter facility, a renovation to our cut and wrap facility, which are about 5 miles apart, and then this butcher shop / restaurant downtown Helena. So construction management and trying to get those things functional in time to create some cash flow and save our bacon. Let's see. Our goal by 2028 is 15.7 million in sales. Right. An interesting stat is that less than 2% of the meat eaten in Montana is from here, or at least verifiably from here. You might buy meat that's from Montana in Costco, but you wouldn't know it. And so roughly 6 million of 428 million sold in the state is local. So our big task is, hey, let's make a dent in that. Even doubling it would make only a small dent. I think we'll employ 60 people by 2028 if this stuff works. And our goal is to sell to 5,000 individual families in addition to the wholesale efforts that we're kind of wading into carefully. And then there's only one more slide, which is just how we've kind of structured things. There's a parent company, that's where all the ownership exists, where the investment exists, where the debt commitments exist. And then there's these subsidiaries underneath the parent company, just about to take on the $6.3 million of debt. We found a unicorn bank that only focuses on this type of agriculture and value-added agriculture. They're based out of New York, but they did not require personal guarantees on the loans from the ranches. So they weren't risking their operations to start what is a very risky meat company. And that was huge. We would not be around if it wasn't for that. And yeah, what the non-voting Class C preferred investors who provide capital get is not governance, but their money back first with interest, and then they continue to own a small portion of the profits. But once they're paid back, half of the profits can be shared back with the people who use the business, the ranchers and the workers. So that's a million miles an hour, just kind of overview of what we're working on. And like I said, we're built to add more ranches over time that elect the board, are eligible for the board, and that supply livestock. But at the moment, we're low on supply, and the proof will be, can we build a market, people who regularly buy from us at enough volume to make the whole thing work. So I'll just kind of leave it at that and see if people have any questions. I'm not selling anything other than just sharing something that's going on around here. Pedro and Tana said, hey, come share what you're working on.
Yeah, you generated
we sell an organ blend of ground beef that actually sells just as well as our regular ground beef. We make pate, a mix of Mangalitsa hog fat with beef liver. So we're able to generate some revenue, but still things like hide, we'll have to do about 60 a week in order to start getting any value from the hide. And I think we could, if we get to that volume, we might be able to generate $40 to $50 a hide. Big guys get about $90 a hide right now. We sell marrow bones. We sell a fair number of, that's for usually for human consumption, and then some other dog bones and dog treats. But that capturing dollars from the drop is really critical. It's about $190 per animal for the pack, for the big packers that they're able to capture. So us getting at least north of 50 or 60 bucks a head would be big. See the livestock right now. So they finish land. They have they sold their commercial van, but they have a few hundred target, I think, that they finish on alfalfa pellets over the wintertime. And it's a seasonal supply. That's about 6 months worth of supply, and we freeze what we need more of when it's not available. I'm back here. Okay. Yeah.
Where do you think for your sale?
It's very important to the market we started in. A good food store in Missoula had approached us really early on, and they wanted grass-fed, grass-finished. They wanted a never ever any kind of hormones or antibiotics program, and they moved 4 or 5 carcasses a month, and so that was worth it for us to go through the learning process of finishing on grass. And I think that there's quite a few people who are buying outside of the commodity system who are looking for that. But also, I don't really personally think, and neither does our family or our brand, we don't necessarily think that grass-fed, grass-finished is the right place to draw a line. There's a lot of ways to feed other feeds to cattle that they can do well if it's all done right. That make a lot of sense, especially byproducts. And I also think that when your client is the chef and not so much the individual family, they are looking for consistency. And it is harder to do that on grass. I think we've gotten our own Mannix family cattle to a frame size and a process where they're fairly consistent, but you start aggregating grass-finished carcasses across ranches because of differences in frame size and genetics, you're just going to have more variability, which is fine when you're selling to a family because they're likely getting, meat from one animal. But when you're selling just regularly to, one restaurant and they've got something very specific on their menu, they want to see that. If they're cutting a steak 1.5 inches thick, they want to see it roughly the same diameter every time. They're more interested in consistency. So I think if we're going to break into wholesale markets at scale, the grain side seems important.
Other things that I was thinking, we talked about home. Based on the diversity of product. Exploiting that as another product. Because sounds like you're not having a sustainable basis. As long as you can handle the SKUs, yeah, that's the difficult thing.
Yeah, we got to not get over our skis on how many SKUs and yeah, not for sure. Thank you.
Sales you have.
Well, we're currently selling online just because we don't have a fleet yet, you know, and it's our only way to get product to customers, and so we just decided to offer that option, and we sell maybe 12,000 a month, pretty small. And the main thing is that we can't absorb the existing business of Mannix and these other ranches. They have some existing local business, about $1.5 million worth. We can't absorb that into the Old Salt brand until we get USDA processing. So there'll be some built-in growth once that processing comes online. But then the next question is, you know, do we continue running this delivery route where people meet you in a parking lot, you know, in Missoula and Flathead area, or do we consider door-to-door delivery? We've done some math on that, and I'm still not sold that that's the way to do it. One of our incoming members, so there's several ranches that are kind of waiting in the wings, and the reason they're interested in joining is the same thing Mannix is experiencing, which is these little brands that are trying to sell locally, cannibalizing each other for business in the same market, you know, because it's kind of the same restaurants and the same grocery stores who are willing to buy local. And so a lot of those brands are saying, well, we like what Old Salt's doing, where these restaurants could order from, you know, one brand with one system of delivery, but still get a meat that has the ranch labeled on the package, you know, where they know the ranch of origin. And anyway, one of those members has a little Bond Farm store in Missoula, just on the outskirts, on the south end of town. And the little store, they don't staff it. It's an honor system that you can pay Venmo, credit card, check, and it's about to sell 250,000 this year with basically no labor. So we're just asking the question, could one of those little stores, you know, in different Montana towns move enough to make a difference? That question of how do we get it to our 5,000 customers is still a big outstanding question for us. But if in the meantime, we are shipping meat out of state from whoever orders it right now. Yeah, so they're kind of one of the ranches that's just, we've known those guys for a long time. We sell meat back and forth, and neither my own family, my brother who runs the program, nor Bart is super convinced that they want to spend all their time in the freezer. And so they're just figuring out would it work better to work under one brand together. But that decision for them is not made. It's just something they're evaluating.
Why much? Because it seems like
right. I mean, I think people always prefer fresh. It's just the convenience of it, not having to defrost it. If you're at the grocery store 2 or 3 days a week, got to get what you need for those few days. But from a perspective, when you really press chefs on it, or even when you really press your customers in terms of eating experience, is it that different? I don't think so. I mean, there's certainly appeal of just seeing it in the case fresh. That is always going to be sexy. But it's also from the perspective of the ranches holding livestock on the ranch and feeding them live for as little a time as they can. There's reasons to really do mostly frozen. And so we'll maintain a small fresh case just for sex appeal in the butcher shop downtown. But for the most part, it'll all be frozen. Even if we had an up and running feeding program for ruminants, you know, where we had cattle in a lot somewhere, fresh would still be challenging. It's nice to have that frozen option. Yeah.
I guess my question is about about grain fish or draft fish. I mean, obviously draft fish is hard to just give me some folks. We look at the economics of that. In Montana, we have big drafts in the summer, but our high cost of input is feeding those cattle for the winters. How does that factor into your decision to maybe go to more than grain fed level?
Yeah. Yeah, so in the case of my own family, what we've done is to set our price for a grass finished carcass based on the opportunity cost of having sold that as a calf that goes into the grain system. And in most years, that grass finished carcass that we're selling at $3.10 a pound, it's before processing. And in most years, that beats our opportunity cost on grain fed, on calves. And yearlings are even a little better than that. And so we have to make sure that we're also more often than not beating the opportunity cost on commodity yearlings. But it's still going to be more expensive to produce a grass finished carcass here. So if you took we just sold yearling 780 pound steers on the live auction contract for this fall at $278. So if I took that and I finished it on grain, I'd have to get $355 for a grain finished carcass. And if I took that same kind of opportunity cost and instead finished that yearling on grass, I'd have to get about $4. And so it's going to be more expensive to finish it on grass. But it's, the thing about the grain finishing for me is kind of two things. Right now, anybody that I've talked to so far that's finishing animals on grain in the state is buying those commodities just wherever they can get them the most cheap. And we're a brand that we care about habitat, we care about open space, and we care about long-term fertility. And when you're buying commodity grain, that's a part of the supply chain you're blind to. And so if I could begin sourcing from a group of farmers, and I know a couple of groups, specifically their feed grade grains, I would feel a lot better about the supply chain. And if I could also feed that back out on pasture, there's a couple of people doing that at small scale, that would be kind of the holy grail. But to start up a grain finishing program this fall, I don't have access to the holy grail, and I don't know enough, and I don't have enough capital to do it ourselves. And so we're going to have to take what we can get and make it good enough if we're going to do it start putting on yearlings on feed this fall. Otherwise, we'll continue to finish on grass until we can come to enough trust in the grain finishing side and a set of partners that it makes sense with. I mean, right now the ranches that started to kind of have the genetics they have, but our cattle are the smallest of all of them. The Mannix cattle are super small frame size. The mother cows are 1,100 pounds, fully mature, sometimes a little bigger than that. But that tends to work better for a grass finished carcass. And our cattle are not the highest performing feedlot cattle. We've kind of bred them to be as low input on the ranch as we can. We're basically all Angus producers, but the Seed and Livestock Company certainly has bigger cows overall, but it's still a fairly similar eating experience. It's just going to be a bigger grain finished carcass, a little bit higher performing cows from a Seed and Livestock than it would be from Mannix in a feedlot scenario.
Any further questions, or has anything, I'm curious, when was the last time there was local processing like this in and around the bagel? Like things used to operate much more locally in markets. Am I mistaken about that? Long time.
Yes.
Why does Big Hole need your profits now?
What was your biggest hire? So everything they process, they update us and you feel that
Yeah, so, one of the things, my answer to that question would be, I had an interesting experience talking with the Van Thriftway stores. I think there's 6 of those in Montana. There's one across the street from where I live in Helena. And the major transition that they talk about was the 1980s box beef transition, where, you have these grocery stores that used to have more of a full butchery department. And then when the industry went to box beef and the grocery stores stopped receiving meat on the bone, and instead they began receiving, it had been centrally processed somewhere, broken down, and now they receive it and they become more of a receptacle to put out meat on the shelves. And, there's some reasons for that. I mean, every little grocery store having to go through their own HACCP process, have their own highly skilled staff. They still do, a lot of them still do a little bit of steak cutting and a little bit of grinding, but mostly they're not butchers anymore. And so there's been some efficiencies gained as we move to box beef in this system. The inefficiency comes when people get COVID in a plant and it shuts down and you have to bury 1,000 hogs in the ground because it's more expensive to keep feeding them than it is to just cut your losses. So the big industry system is very efficient in some ways. I mean, I can't sell tripe for $8 a pound. The big guys can to Taiwan. And so they're very efficient at utilizing carcasses in that way. But if it breaks, it's also kind of a mess until you get it back up and running. And so our hope is to see more medium-sized networks of meat production and processing and distribution and retail, so the system's a little less vulnerable. And I think more than anything, there's such a global concern about both livestock and the environment and meat and health. And I think a lot of it is because the producers and customers really don't know each other and don't do business with each other. And that's where knowledge and relationship and trust really happens. And so they're very receptive to press that demonizes meat or livestock when they really aren't connected. But when they can ask questions and when they can have a relationship with their butcher and when they can come to a festival and when they can show up at a restaurant and actually ask people questions about the product, that's where trust is built. And so I think a lot of the public perception problems the industry has is because we've gotten very efficient at just getting pounds of meat to people. But we've lost the greater story behind it. Why does it matter? And we've lost some resiliency in our own supply chain.
Well, half of that product is talk, right? Never even makes it to a customer.
I don't know which product.
Well, just generally speaking, food production globally, I think it's a tremendous amount of waste. In that highly efficient system, it's baked in that, stuff's just not going to sell in time and it's going to get tossed out.
I'm not super knowledgeable about waste as it relates to the global meat industry. I don't know how a person gets knowledgeable about that. I hear often that 40% of the food in the country is wasted. Running a restaurant now, I think of what that means is a lot of people are just not finishing their plate and dumping it in the garbage.
Yeah.
Certainly the industrial system is wasteful when it breaks because there's no replacements for it. But when it's operating right, it uses everything, Yeah. So it's pick your poison, what kind of vulnerability do you want? Yeah. And I think one of the things my own cousins and brothers and sisters have found with our tiny little Mannix program is it's just more enjoyable to know your customer. It gives you meaning in what you do. And it also, makes you think about some things that they're concerned about that you hadn't thought of. And it also just gives you a platform when they come with a concern that you can pretty easily explain to them why you do it a certain way and the different parameters that you're considering to make a decision. A lot of times they go, oh, makes sense.
Can't put a price on that. Knowing exactly what you're using.
I agree. Yeah.
We want to do this from the age.
That's right. Yeah, we used a guy he grew up in the Stanford Belt area named Jim McCafferty. And basically what his advice has been that depending on the state inspector you get, could be really good. But for the most part, the standards are the same. There's a little bit more variation in interpretation of the rules at the state level sometimes. And so he encouraged us to kind of just go straight to USDA. It gives your clients, like if ranches are bringing animals to us to process, that those clients have more options of where to sell. And it's basically the same brick and mortar. It's the same processes anyway. And so we've kind of just decided, let's go to USDA and meet that bar. And even that can be fickle. It really depends on your inspector and how they interpret things. And there's just a gazillion different ways to interpret how much rust can be on a rail. You know, like how wide a perimeter of mouse traps have to be around the premises, you know, just all the tiny little minutiae of the HACCP plans. So that's another thing, is it's not just butchers that would become short on, but it's inspectors, people who grew up in agriculture, people that have practical experience. And so whether they're going by the spirit of the law or the letter of the law matters a lot. And whether they basically want you to succeed and so they're helping you step through each hoop, or whether they're just looking for ways to catch you. And that matters a huge amount. Yeah.
Issues China today.
I mean, they don't. We're a pissant, but I do think I've heard from quite a few meat brands like Country Natural Beef, folks that have reached a bigger scale. They do about 150 million a year, still small by industry standards, but it starts to be where the packers can get a little bit protective of their territory. And my goal is to never be on their radar. But I mean, I think that the biggest coup that they really have is the food safety law itself, which is very one size fits all. And so what it really means is it's marketed to people in terms of food safety, but you know what you have to do when you're doing 3,000 head of livestock a day versus 60 a week at ranch land. It's a very different brick and mortar setup, very different in terms of the technology needed to have a clean, healthy operation. So it doesn't need to be one size fits all, but it kind of is. And that is just, you know, it's folks getting over the bar and then raising it to try to make competition harder. It's no different than Montana liquor law. You know, if you make a liquor license $700,000, you know, only once those people get a liquor license and have it paid off, they're quite happy to keep it that expensive. But everybody else would love to, if they're trying to start up a little food operation, they'd love to see them $50,000. And that'd probably work fine. But
you're doing a great job.
Thanks. Yeah, we have a long ways to go, but yeah, I mean, some folks are kind of taking the boutique route as a small meat company. I'm seeing there's a really good brand actually out of Northern California called Five Marys. There's literally 5 Marys. The mom is Mary. There's 4 Marys who are daughters that have different middle names, and they've done a really amazing job. But their ground beef online is $17.99. Their ground lamb is like $22.99, and then you're really going to pick a sliver of the population and say, I'm going to sell to the coast and I'm going to find those. And we're just more trying to sell. How many neighbors can we sell to in Montana? And if we're priced out immediately if we go to that level. So it's like you go after a boutique market where you're trying to make things, it's going to be a little more expensive if it's local, but can it be as accessible as possible with our goal?
Do you see a demand for larger volumes from your customers? Are folks typically picking up like, steak for the next 2 weeks? Or do you see folks that have their own freezer space and want to just right out of the gate buy a half an animal or a quarter of an animal?
Like the managed brand probably has 50 people a year who buy a whole animal. And that out of 600 accounts, that who regularly buy. Yep. So some people, I mean, I think the average Montanan spends $983 on meat a year. That was the most recent stat I saw. And I would say probably the people we sell to eat a little more than that. But we're getting some fairly big inquiries from Like Pacific Seafood called the other day, they don't have a beef and lamb program, but they have 3,000 employees. They're a big company. They're considering adding a program, and for a tiny little group like us, it's like, you know, can we take a risk with somebody like that? And that's this whole risk of wholesale question. I'd love to find a little bit smaller client to start with.
Yeah.
But we certainly are. I mean, there's a guy, he ran a meat shop in Bozeman Food Co-op. He was the grass-fed guy there forever. He's a really great guy. He's 40, 42, 43, tons of energy, got a lot of experience, but still a lot of energy. And he's a dyed-in-the-wool, grass-fed, grass-finished guy. But as a distributor now, he runs a distributor. He's just saying, look, most of my customers, restaurant clientele, because grocery's not fit for us. Most of my restaurant clientele, they just want grain finished. And so if we want to, even if your ultimate goal is to sell more grass finished meat, unless you can just start somewhere, like, okay, let's just start with Montana, born, raised, and processed. That's a step in the right direction from my perspective. And I'd much rather take a smaller risk with a Bozeman-based distributor who's marketing to people who have a chance of knowing the landscape since these livestock are being raised in. You know, it's not so much. I think we start to lose our niche appeal, and the fact that folks might know Adel, Montana, the Chestnut Valley, people might know the Blackfoot and the Centennial, where these ranches are raising animals. That's our niche with Montana customers. As soon as we go to Seattle and Portland, we're just another niche brand that, even if we have quality product, as soon as they find somebody else that is decent quality at a better price, they'll jump ship pretty easy. So I just, closer to home, we can build with people we have a chance of knowing, and who have a chance of knowing kind of what we're about and the landscapes we're coming from. That's kind of where we're really trying to focus our energy. Well, thank you guys.
Well, guys, yeah, big round of applause.
Thanks to you guys all. Don't produce a lot of beef here, and I just thought that what he's doing is really inspiring. Our next meeting is September. What do we got on tabs of wildlife? Sage grouse at our next meeting. Thank everybody for coming. Drive safe. And without further ado, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thanks again to Cole for driving all this way. Appreciate you. Thank you.